Today we are talking about one of the most powerful books ever written by an African, Things Fall Apart by great Chinua Achebe. Now, this isn't just a story about one man called Okonkwo. It's the story of a people, the Igbo people, their beliefs, their traditions, their way of life before coming of the white man. Achebe didn't just write a novel. He gave us a mirror to see who we were before the world changed us. So, for the next few minutes, we are going to walk through that world, the world of Umuofia. We will talk about what life looked like, how people worshipped, loved, worked, celebrated, and what eventually made everything to fall apart. Let's begin. The story in Things Fall Apart takes us back to the late 1800s, a time before colonial rule in what is now called Nigeria. Umuofia, the village in Achebe's story, wasn't just a random place. It was a reflection of the Igbo society, organized, spiritual, community-driven as well. There were no kings with golden crowns in Umuofia. Instead, leadership came from elders, titled men, and respected voices. It was a gerontocratic system of leadership. Everyone had a say, and decisions were made through long discussions filled with proverbs, wisdom from the ancestors, and it was called an organized anarchy. In Umuofia, hard work and reputation mattered a lot, more than anything you inherited from your ancestors or forefathers. The people honored the land and respected their gods and celebrated the seasons with songs, drums, and festivals of different kinds. Achebe's goal was clear: to show the world that before colonization, Africa wasn't silent. We had systems, we had order, we had culture, and most importantly, we were civilized. Now let's talk about the man Okonkwo, whose story carries the heart of this book. The man Okonkwo was known across the 9 villages of Umuofia, strong, fierce, determined. He built his fame after defeating a great wrestler called Amalinze, the cat, a man no one had beaten for 7 years of wrestling seasons. That victory made him a community hero. But Okonkwo's real drive came from one thing: fear. Not fear of war or spirits or death, but fear of becoming like his own father, Onoka. Onoka was gentle, cheerful, loved music and palm wine, but was poor and always in debt. The village saw him as a failure, and Okonkwo swore that his life would be different from the life of his father, Onoka. That fear pushed him to work harder than anyone else. It made him rich, respected, and feared, but it also made him harsh and even cruel. He couldn't stand anything soft, kind, or emotional. He believed gentleness was weakness, and that belief became his greatest downfall. In today's world, he didn't want to be seen or perceived as a saint. Religion shaped everything in Igbo life. People believed that life was connected to the gods and land and the spirits of their ancestors as well. They worshipped many deities, gods of the earth, of rain, of fertility, of famine, and they believed every person had a chi, a personal spirit that guided them everywhere they went and in every decision they took. That is why till today there is an Igbo saying that goes thus: when a man says yes, his chi says yes as well. Onye kweri chi ekweri. It means your determination walks hand in hand with your destiny. There were sacred times too, like the week of peace, when no one was allowed to fight or curse, so the earth goddess could bless their crops. But Okonkwo broke that peace. He beat his wife for a small offense during that holy week. And after that, he was punished not just by the priest, but by shame. That single act reminds us how deeply religion was woven into moral life. It wasn't just about fear of punishment. It was about keeping harmony between the people, the gods, and the earth. The size of a man's household shows his strength and discipline. He could have more than one wife, but each woman had her own hut, her own farm, and her own dignity. The oldest wife is often referred as a nasi and given her own respect. She is the head wife, and all other wives are subjects to her in Igbo culture. Women cooked, farmed, and raised children, but they were more than just caretakers. They carried stories, traditions, and courage that often went unseen or unnoticed. Take Ekwefi, Okonkwo's second wife, for instance. She risked her life following the priestess in the middle of the night to save her daughter, Ezimma. That is love, and that is great strength. Achebe shows us here something very important, that power isn't always loud or masculine. Sometimes true strength comes in quiet, protective love, which Ekwefi had shown here in trying to protect her daughter, Ezimma, from the priestess. In Umuofia, as we can see, culture guided everything. How people solved disputes, how they celebrated, how they lived. The community believed in justice, not the kind written in books, but the kind rooted in fairness and spirituality. If a man wronged another, he stood before the elders and his case was judged by wisdom and proverb. People are allowed fair hearing to discuss before a decision is reached by a group that is usually carefully selected to make decisions, do investigation, and then recommend what decisions the elders would often take. This is usually described as organized anarchy, but it is an ancient democratic practice of the Igbo people's jury system. One of the most powerful lines from the book says, if one finger brought oil, it soiled the others. It means one person's mistake can stain the whole community. That is why when Okonkwo accidentally killed a clansman at a funeral, he was exiled for 7 years, as it is in Igbo culture. His exile wasn't out of hatred. It was an act of cleansing and propitiation, keeping the balance between man, nature, and the spirit. It demonstrated one thing, that no one was above tradition, not even their community hero, Okonkwo. But when Okonkwo returned from exile, Umuofia was no longer the same. Missionaries had arrived, bringing a new religion and a new way of life. They called the old gods false and promised freedom to those who had always been outcasts. At first, the people laughed at them, but slowly things began to change. The message of peace and salvation drew people in, especially those who felt left behind by their own culture. Even Okonkwo's son, Roye, was moved by their words. he joined them. To him, their kindness felt more human than his father's anger. That moment was more than just family drama. It symbolized the breaking point between the old and the new worlds. Achebe shows us how culture can fall apart, not just through war or invasion, but through quiet persuasion, when people start to doubt their own self, their own values, their own belief, and their own way of life. Culture can fall apart. And when culture falls apart, the people fall apart because it is a shared history and a shared story that keep people together. But when a strange element comes in to introduce to these people that the story they have always believed is false, that their gods and ancestors are false and evil, the people begin to disbelieve themselves, begin to disbelieve their story, and then they begin to fall apart. By the end of the story, Okonkwo is broken. The clan he once knew no longer listened to the old ways of life. The white man have built forts, prisons, and even government. Okonkwo sees his world slipping away, and in one final act of despair, he takes his own life. An ultimate abomination and taboo in Igbo culture to take one's life. In Igbo belief, suicide is an abomination of the highest order. It is not in one's power to take his or her own life. No one may touch the body of a person who dies by suicide. Even his burial must be done by strangers. This touches a very important aspect of the Igbo life when we are discussing the Igbo landing. We begin to reconsider, did our Igbo brothers at the Denver Creeks really commit suicide? Did they really drown or they turned back? Did they really drown or they were drowned? Did our Igbo brothers really drown? Because it is enshrined in the Igbo culture that anyone who dies by suicide is not qualified for the afterlife, is not qualified for a dignified funeral. So, it is against the core belief, no matter how difficult life is, for an Igbo man to take a life, worse still, to take his own life. So, this brings a question mark to the activities, to the story behind what happened at the Igbo landing. Achebe ends the story this way for a reason. Okonkwo's death is not a personal tragedy. It is the death of a culture that could not survive change, a culture that failed to evolve. When the roots of tradition are cut off, even the strongest trees will fall. Achebe's novel Things Fall Apart still speaks to us today, more than 60 years ago when it was even published. It reminds us that our culture, our language, our ways of life matter a whole lot. That we had a civilization before colonialism, that we had laws, beauty, wisdom, judicial system, and community values before colonialism. It also teaches us to adapt, to question the parts of culture that cause harm, and preserve the realms that give life. For us in Enuani and every part of Igbo land, the message is simple. Don't lose what makes us who we are. Celebrate our stories, our dances, our language, our culture, our unity, our food. Because once a people forget where they come from, they no longer know where they are headed. As our people say, Ipa kemiri mame, omanebe miri si bido mama, omanebe onobi. It is only a fool that is drenched by rain. He doesn't know where the rain started, neither does he know where the rain ended. Thank you for staying with us through this journey into Things Fall Apart by Professor Chinua Achebe. If this story inspired you, share it, talk about it. Let's keep our culture alive by telling our stories again, 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 and again. Please, don't forget to subscribe to Enuani Cultural Forum, where we celebrate the rich cultural heritage, language, and wisdom of our ancestors. And remember, as Achebe said, until the lions have their own historians, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Let's be the lions who tell our own stories.